and you?
Doing well, thank you. So I just want to I love the show, so I wanted to get started with um, when you get the script for an episode like this, where there's so much going on, where you're bridging what happened in the first ep five, and then also setting up what's going to happen in the finale. What's your sort of approach, like when you get the script? Like, how are you breaking it down? Are you breaking it down by what you're going to shoot first, or what the emotional beats are, or how's that work for you?
I think it's emotional beats. Because at the end of the day, it's all about characters, even if obviously the plot it's driven the series. But I think it is like, okay, so how do we conclude, kind of like you were saying, like the emotional journey that these characters have had until now, and then how do we? And by the time I think I directed the episode, maybe I had read episode 7, but not 8. So I didn't really know where was the ultimate goal. So it was really fun to see where it ended up going when I got the scripts. But like it truly was about like, hey, this episode is all about the characters and the emotions and the closure with the relationships. And then we go back a little bit to a bigger plot or the biggest conspiracy that Upload is dealing with this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And then since these scripts are so tightly written and since there's so much VFX work involved, I imagine there's not too much room to change things. But what's your sort of, I don't know, how much improvisation is allowed on the set, or do you guys take a bunch of, do you take a couple alt takes if you need them?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of improvisation actually. I mean, most of what it ends up being on the episode is actually, what was written actually by Owen. But a lot of the times, maybe like the end of the scene could be improvised mostly, or something like that. So there is a lot of improvisation. The actors have such good chemistry, like it's so fun to see them bounce ideas and see where they can go. And so there is quite improvisation. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. And then yeah, since these actors have been in these roles for like about 3 years now, so it's like since they know the characters so well. But then in this episode, you have a lot of characters playing inebriated versions of themselves.
Yeah.
You have Nora at the beginning of the episode, then Nathan and Ingrid both near the end of the episode, where they're very drunk. So what kind of notes are you giving? Are you ever telling them to scale it back a little bit, or maybe amp it up, and or depending on who the character is?
Yeah, I think we did different kind of like you were saying, like variations of like how drunk can someone be, or how high should they be, or I think a lot of it is finding the right balance, because especially what I love about Greg Daniels and all his shows, and it's also in the writing, like how do you ground those like absurd moments that could be very over the top? And I think that's the great thing about the actors, that they're able to, take a little bit something absurd, ground it, and then maybe scale it down. Like maybe we can have that joke very high, or we can have that, you know, more grounded. Like I think there's like room to play with the actors for sure. And I think again, like I think this episode challenged the actors in a way that we haven't seen before, like with the relationships and the things that they're experiencing with. So it was also fun for them to have these emotions.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, and then there is a lot of conversation in this episode. And so, like, when it goes from like a heavy comedy to, and then you have this huge tonal shift to like this emotional, like Ingrid has very emotional moments, Nora's having emotional, was Nathan's having it all over the place as well, and obviously, Luke is also. But so, how do you deal with that sort of just like nailing that sort of tonal shift, or how do you approach like knowing it's coming?
Uh, I think it's first it's in the writing, and also like working with the actors. How can we make, kind of like you were saying, a little bit of improvisation maybe, or even the staging, right? Like I think the staging of the actors sometimes does reach, like can we, for example, in the scenario we mentioned, like Ingrid has that emotional moment. It's like, well, I think maybe she needs more space. So how about if we start her sitting, behind him, and then as she walks around, she has a moment of coming down from that emotional thing to like I'm going back with Nathan, and then bridge that like emotional thing, and that also helps the audience to go in like, okay, so we just saw something emotional and now it's fun again. And then it just feels right. I think, when you're working with actors, like try to find those little moments here and there that they can help, because at the end of the day, like you said, it's a comedy, right? So they better be
Mhm.
laughing even if they were a little bit, emotional 5 seconds before.
Yeah, absolutely, and the episode is very funny. And then you also have there's opening scenes. You do get to shoot both versions of Nathan, upload and download versions at the beginning. But you also, I noticed, sort of use a different where like usually you have like the split screen and they're just in like the empty void, but you have Kevin's character Luke in the middle of them. So how'd that sort of work out? How's that? Can you break down how you pull that kind of shot off where you have this like actual living character versus just like a plain background in your
Yeah,
foreground, I guess.
I think the good thing about like Robbie, he's like amazing with like knowing his timing, and I think a lot of the times the scene that you were mentioning is like crane shots and all that stuff, but he always knew how to hit his mark. And how it works is like he has a double, Robbie, who he plays the scene off with, and then we have to shoot it like sometimes 3, sometimes 4 times. So it's like, for the over the shoulders, you shoot it, one with Robbie and Kevin, and then you have to, and then the other one is with the other actor, and then you switch, and then you reshoot it again, but with a green screen, so that you're able to insert him there. So we always kind of like have to shoot it 2 or 3 times with green screen to be able to insert him in between. And usually, some over the shoulders in other shows, whatever, are cheated with like a fake Nathan or whatever. Like in this one, it was always him. So we have to shoot, even if it was like just his shoulder, we have to reshoot the scene just to have the real shoulder.
Awesome. And then you also have this crazy when they're trying to break into Choke's sort of memories, you have the actor just this sort of head show up. So what's that? What goes into that sort of that visual effect? Where because I'm assuming the actor is not just. I mean, I don't know if he is or not, but what can you break down that kind of effect that you were able to pull off?
That one, we should one with the actors who he's supposed to interact with, and then we shoot the lamp clean, like so they can able to insert it, and then we get the actor who plays Choke to be just there standing, and then they put him like a little bit of like a green screen to cover his neck, and then they insert like the 3 elements together of like, oh, the actors, the lamp, and he. So that's how it kind of like works out.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So then when you're since you already did know what was coming sort of in episode 7, but not exactly where this plane was gonna land. But how are you kind of breaking down your shooting schedule where you have to get X, Y, and Z done in this particular? I'm assuming because the way just how the episodes are sort of cut, you're trying to make sure that you're spending the time, and then you have also time on VFX. So can you just break down the making of one episode and what the sort of timeline it takes for you to actually complete it?
It takes about 7 days to shoot. And then I shot last November. So, and then I guess like it took them a year to finish, the whole season. And then like the breakdown is really depends on the sets really. We usually don't break it down according to, the emotional arcs or whatever. It's more about like, hey, we're shooting everything in Lakeview from day 1 to 2. And then we're shooting the gray zone day 3. Then we're shooting, it's morely about like stacking the locations more than anything else. Which was, I mean, when you're shooting something like this, is like really great because like Lakeview, that was also amazing to be, like, oh my God, like it has roofs and everything. So like I felt I was in the real hotel. So like it's really mostly about like locations and actor availability, and then more than story. But because the actors are so good, they know, it's my job is really to help them to remind them, oh, this is where you just came from, this is where we're going, and then they bring their own thing.
Yeah, and then you also get to show a very different side of the AI guy that we don't typically see him be so upfront and have this kind of the reaction that he has in the episode. So what's it like working with someone like Owen, who's just kind of, it feels like everyone in the cast feels like they're up for, actually, yeah, like pretty much like, what's it feel like just having a cast that's just up for pretty much doing whatever script demands and what you demand of them, and working with all these different like moving pieces to make this show?
It's a joy, like you really get to play with like the best of the best, like you have the support from Prime, so you have like like the time and what you need. And then Owen is the writer of this episode too, so when he was like playing that, we were able to take different versions of AI, like because he's been kind of learning, so maybe he's finally learned a little bit how to be more human, where he will like actually maybe not snap, but like tell it as it is, like we've never seen before, like you mentioned. So that was a really fun scene to shoot, and then everyone's just like ready to do the best job they can do, like even if it's season 3, they're still excited to be playing this character, and I think that really comes through the scene. And the reason people I think really respond to the show is because the characters are still loving playing it. They don't feel like, oh, you know, season 3, I want to do something else. Like they always enjoy playing
Yeah.
these characters. Yeah.
And like from your perspective, because when you're looking at the monitor, I guess, because you know, in that one scene where Nora and Nathan are looking through the, I'm assuming there's nothing on the screens that they're actually looking at. I don't know if you had any like video playing or not, but how do you like just look at that scene and be like, hey, it's working or it's not working, or what are you telling them? It's like, hey, make it feel like more real, or uh, just sort of like you know what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah. How do you make? I mean, I think they have really good imagination. There was nothing, you know, playing up there, and it was
Mhm.
more about like describing what would be on screen, you know. And I think they just like, I think once you have like something very um what is called very concrete in your head, you don't have to imagine. So it's like more like, oh, it's gonna be kind of like, you know, Prime Video menu where you like can scroll and it's like, oh, okay, I've done that before. I know how that's gonna look. So they were like mostly playing or like trying to explore and stuff. So it was more about, I think about those scenes is more about the more specific you can be with the imagination, the less they have room to imagine like, oh, you know, like the screen is here and they're like looking the other way, right? Like you have to be very precise. Like here's gonna be like the main video, here's gonna be the scrolling, and then it's up to them to like imagine. And I think if you give people limits, they're very good at like imagining.
Yeah, no, they do such a good job. And then you have a lot of, there are romantic moments in the episode. Some of them are inadvertent, I guess, but um, is there a particular genre when you're like dealing with a show that blends so much so well that you find more complicated to maybe like convey on screen? Like, you know, romance is a certain thing, comedy is a different thing, drama, like the sort of the thriller element of the show, is there particular you find more challenging or find more almost fun to, you know, kind of like direct?
Was I think for this episode what was really fun to me was how do you make that like I wouldn't say like necessarily like spy or thriller, but they were like trying to find answers, and then we have that reveal of with Nora. How do you make that reveal happen, and how do you make it like how do you yeah like I think one of the things that I always told Greg that I love about the show that it blends genres, right? Like it's never just one genre. It's like it keeps changing, but what makes it upload is the characters are in like a movie that is like a thriller, or they're in a romantic movie but they're the same characters. And then I think a lot of it is like more like camera movements. How do you make it feel more romantic, or how do or the lighting, right? Like make it warmer, or how do we, you know, reflections. I use a lot of reflection in this episode of like, because there's two Nathans, so whenever we could do something with the mirrors, I thought it was, you know, a fun way to keep reminding people of like the two Nathans. So it's mostly about like camera work than really the characters, because the characters are always themselves. They just put in situations that are different genres.
Yeah, and then for that opening scene where you do have Nora, it's like, so is that, I'm assuming that's just the same set that we've seen a bunch of,
Yeah.
but are you like just, were you, what's your idea just to sort of like expand, like let's show this side that no one usually typically sees, and that add sort of what hypothetically like a real world version could look like, or what went into
Yeah.
like sort of designing that set or like expanding that set?
Yeah, that was it. Like I think there was some excitement, you know, within the same writers and Greg itself. Like, you know, like I think it would be himself, like it would be fun to show the fans how our actual set looks like. And that's how the set looks like. Obviously they enhance it to make it like a humongous hangar with like a jet and everything. But that's really how the roof looks like. That's how like everything usually it's on set. So I think it was like how to use something that is already built and make it part of the blood wall. And it was mostly, you know, expanding the surroundings more than the actual set.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so like I don't want to keep too long, but we had you get to work with Greg Daniels on this show. So what's your, and he's made, obviously he's made so many great television shows. He's worked and he's made this another one here. So what was your experience sort of working alongside Greg, maybe learning from him, and your just experience as him as the showrunner, and sort of, I don't know, what's your experience of working with Greg,
Yeah.
I guess is the bottom line.
No, he truly is amazing. Like I had no expectations, right? Like, I mean, obviously I knew I'm a big fan, and he was like, he's huge and I'm a winner. And so it was like maybe at the beginning I was like, oh, how is he gonna be intimidated? But like he's such a nice guy. Like he has like a vision, and but he's also willing to hear, you know, what you have to say, because I think he's very vocal about saying like, hey, it could have been anyone directing this episode, but it's you. So how are you gonna make this episode your own? Otherwise, I would have hired any other director, you know? Like, so he really wants you to bring your own, I don't know, camera movements like I did in this episode, or how do we bring, you know, your comedy? Like, he really wants to hear from you. And at the same time, he knows, you know, what ship he's writing. So it's like, you feel like in really good hands. Like, you feel like protected, but at the same time he's gonna care, and at the same time if it's something is not working, you'll know, you know, like it's not like, oh, you make a mistake, who cares? Like, he wants you to help, you know, do the best job you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And you nail so many good character interactions. So I just want to leave you with, like, is there any certain, like, your own trademark that you left on this show that you hope audiences catch when they get to see it in a few weeks? Because I mean, this is the one. I mean, I remember it stayed in my head just because of that whole everything that happened in the second half. It just stayed in my head until we're talking right now. But so, is there any like trademark that you left of your own that you hope, you know, audience members catch up on?
I'm a big fan of transitions, so I try to do, which I think there's like a couple or maybe three that there's like, you know, the one they're exploring. There's like a cool transition. I'm a very big fan of transition, and also like camera movements. I think I was able to do a lot of winders. I love winders a lot. And then so it's also really fun to the actors, so they can also like keep it alive, and hopefully people will see that. Or hopefully not, which means, you know, they were into the story. Nobody cares, you know, like about the technical part. Yeah.
No, it's a guy. I mean, no, I noticed it, so I'm sure they will too. But thank you so much for your time, Alberto. I really appreciate it. This has been great. I can't wait for people to see your episode.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Rohan.